May 2nd began like any other morning in rural Nova Scotia. The sun filtered through thick forest canopy onto Garlic Road, where silence was as common as the morning mist. But by 9 a.m., that silence would be shattered by a mother's frantic voice on a 911 call that would change everything. "My children are missing," Malihia Brooks Murray told the dispatcher, her words cutting through the quiet morning air like a blade. 6-year-old Lilly and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan had vanished without a trace from their remote property, leaving behind only questions that grow more haunting with each passing day. If you're drawn to cases where the truth hides in plain sight, where every word carries weight, and where silence speaks louder than screams, then hit that subscribe button now. Because this story will take you deep into the psychology of a mystery that forensic experts are still trying to unravel. Picture this: a ramshackle property on the edge of nowhere, where broken toys mixed with scattered debris in an unkempt yard, where makeshift fencing barely contained the chaos of a life falling apart. This wasn't just a home. It was a place where secrets could hide as easily as children could disappear. Inside lived 5 people that morning. Malihia, the children's mother. Her partner Daniel Martel, who had no legal rights to the children but wielded significant influence in the household. A 17-month-old baby, too young to speak but old enough to witness. And of course, Lilly and Jack, 2 bright, talkative children who would speak to anyone, who loved to explore, who should have been safe in their own backyard. The children's biological father wasn't in the picture, but their paternal grandmother was. And it's through her desperate text messages in those crucial first 48 hours that we begin to see cracks in a story that would eventually crumble under the weight of its own contradictions. At 6 a.m. that morning, 3 hours before reporting them missing, Malihia had called the school's automated system. The reason for their absence? They were homesick. It was routine, unremarkable, unless you know what came next. By 9:40 a.m., according to her own timeline, both children had somehow slipped out the back door of their home and vanished into the dense Nova Scotia wilderness. No coats, despite the cold morning air. No sound, despite a door that supposedly made no noise when opened. No trace, despite bloodhounds that could track a scent for miles. What happened in those 3 hours between the school call and the 911 call? Why would a mother emphasize that her back door made no sound before anyone had even asked? And why would trained search dogs find absolutely nothing when 2 small children had allegedly wandered into the woods? The first text came at 1:46 p.m. on the day the children disappeared. The paternal grandmother, desperate for news, reached out to Malihia with simple questions that would unleash a cascade of revelations about that terrible morning. Any news? Were the kids even supposed to go to school today? Malihia's response was quick, almost rehearsed. They were sick. They got out the back door, that's all. But that wasn't all. She added something curious, that the children liked to explore the woods under supervision. To behavioral analysts, this phrase sent up immediate red flags. Parents don't typically qualify their children's activities with protective disclaimers in casual conversation. You don't say your kids like ice cream under supervision or watch cartoons under supervision. When someone adds this kind of qualifier, especially when their children are already missing, it often signals overcompensation and need to reassure not just the listener, but themselves. Then came the line that would haunt forensic linguists. "I never thought they'd run off like that." Notice the language. Not "I lost them." Not "they disappeared." But "they ran off." This subtle shift moves responsibility from the caregiver to the children themselves. It frames the disappearance not as a failure of supervision, but as an act of will by 2 very young children, a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. In forensic behavioral analysis, truthful language typically centers on the parent's actions or failures. "I looked away for a second," or "I didn't see them leave." But here, Malihia's words painted the children as agents of their own disappearance. The grandmother's next question was simple. "Are your neighbors close?" "No, not too close. We live on Garlic Road. It's remote, rural, sparsely populated." Then, almost casually, Malihia added a detail that reframed everything. "They've been missing since 9:40. They like to wander a lot." That last sentence deserves scrutiny. "They like to wander" makes it sound routine, expected, normal. But just moments earlier, she had stressed that the children were always under supervision when exploring. The contradiction was telling. If you're following this case as closely as we are, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any updates or similar cases where the devil is truly in the details. When asked about clothing, Malihia described Jack in dark clothes with dinosaur boots and Lilly in pink boots with a white toy backpack decorated with strawberries. But what stood out wasn't what they wore, it was what they didn't wear. They didn't put on their coats. It was a chilling statement, literally. The weather that morning was cold, possibly rainy. Not the kind of morning any mother would let her children wander outside unprotected, unless they didn't leave that morning at all. The grandmother's messages grew more urgent. She asked whether more searchers should be called in. It was a plea, quiet but pointed, from someone watching events unfold too slowly from too far away. But Malihia's response wasn't about urgency. It was about deflection. She mentioned there was already a big search team, then abruptly shifted focus. They want info on Cody, the children's biological father, a man who by all accounts wasn't involved, wasn't present, wasn't part of the household. Why mention him? In psychological terms, it's a classic redirect. When someone feels pressured, they may subconsciously search for alternate paths, other suspects, other distractions. But in doing so, they often reveal more than they intend. Then came the bombshell that would reshape the entire investigation. The Bloodhounds arrived with the kind of reputation that gives families hope. These weren't ordinary search dogs. They were trained professionals with an almost supernatural ability to follow even the faintest human scent across miles of terrain. If Lilly and Jack had wandered into those dense Nova Scotia woods, these dogs would find their trail. But when the question came, had the dogs picked up a scent? The answer was devastating in its simplicity. No. That single word sent shockwaves through everyone following the case. No scent at all. No path leading into the forest. No traces of small footprints in the muddy ground. No lingering presence anywhere in the yard. Just absence. Later, Malihia would offer an explanation that raised more questions than it answered. Only one bloodhound in Nova Scotia was even looking. The scent stopped at the driveway. The driveway. That detail matters more than you might think. If two children had wandered into the wilderness, there would have been signs. Scent trails, disturbed vegetation, some trace of their passage, however faint. But a scent that ends at a driveway tells a completely different story. It suggests wheels, not feet. It suggests the children didn't walk away, they were driven. This fed directly into a statement Malihia made that same day. "I have reason to believe they were taken by someone." On the surface, it sounds like a concerned mother voicing her fears. But forensic statement analysis reveals something more complex. The phrase, "I have reason to believe," is loaded with implication. It suggests knowledge, something known or strongly suspected. Yet no basis was given, no elaboration, no explanation of why she believed this. No tip, no sighting, no suspicious activity. Just a claim hanging in the air without foundation. This kind of unsupported assertion often points to narrative shaping, the need to direct a story toward one explanation before the evidence supports it. By evening, the emotional tone of the messages had shifted dramatically. The grandmother, growing desperate, asked whether police had uncovered any leads. The reply finally contained emotion. "I'm praying. I want my babies home. I'm so sick." It was the first overtly emotional statement since the crisis began. But here's what troubled behavioral experts: the timing. Earlier messages had been practical, almost clinical, focused on doors and timelines, on what the children liked to do, and where they might have gone. Rationalizations and redirections rather than grief or panic. Now, suddenly, the emotion arrived. Not built gradually, but all at once, as if on cue. As if to answer an expectation rather than express an impulse. Delayed emotional response isn't a crime. People process trauma differently. But investigators look for patterns, timing, consistency. And here, the emotional flatness followed by sudden escalation was concerning. Because when the facts don't add up, sometimes the feelings don't either. Remember to subscribe if you want to dive deeper into cases where behavioral analysis reveals hidden truths. The next part of the story gets even more disturbing. The timeline itself was becoming increasingly problematic. At 6 a.m., Malihia calls the school to report the children sick. At 9:40 a.m., she discovers them missing. That's 3 hours and 40 minutes of unaccounted time in a household with 5 people. What were they doing during those crucial hours? Where was Daniel Martel? Where was the 17-month-old baby? And why would a mother wait nearly 4 hours after discovering her children missing to reach out to family members? The linguistic patterns in the text messages revealed something else troubling. Malihia's responses showed what forensic experts call psychological distancing, language that subtly removes the speaker from responsibility or emotional connection to events. Instead of, "I can't find my children," it was, "They got out." Instead of, "I'm terrified," it was explanations about doors and supervision. Instead of urgency, there was deflection toward the children's father, toward search teams, toward anyone and anything except the fundamental question: how do 2 small children simply vanish from their own backyard? But the most chilling revelation was yet to come. By May 3rd, something fundamental changed. The paternal grandmother, who had been in constant contact from the moment she learned of the disappearance, found herself cut off from all communication. Her messages went unanswered. Her calls unreturned. The flow of information that had been steady, if troubling, simply stopped. This wasn't gradual. It was abrupt, complete, and it coincided with one specific event: the arrival of Malihia's own mother at the house. From that moment forward, the replies ceased. No more updates, no more speculation, no more shared fears. Just silence. The grandmother's final messages revealed her growing desperation and confusion. "I hope you're not upset with me. I just want the children found." It was the kind of message that reveals more than it says, a soft plea to re-establish contact, worry that she had somehow crossed an invisible line. But grief doesn't usually go silent. Not like this. Not when your grandchildren are still missing. Not when every hour matters. From a behavioral perspective, this sudden disengagement is striking. In crisis situations, families typically become more vocal, not less. They demand answers, coordinate searches, cling to any thread of connection. When someone goes silent in the middle of that storm, it often suggests one of 2 things: legal advice or internal pressure. It may be the moment where grief becomes management, where someone steps in from the background and says, "No more texting, no more talking, say nothing." But that silence speaks volumes. If this were simply a case of 2 children wandering into the woods, what would there be to hide? What would there be to stop sharing? Don't forget to subscribe. We're building a community of people who refuse to let these stories be forgotten, and your subscription helps us continue this important work. The physical environment where Lilly and Jack lived was already telling its own dark story. Long before helicopters took to the skies and search teams combed the wilderness, witnesses described the family property as a place falling apart. Trash littered the yard. Old appliances rusted in corners. Fencing was broken and patched with discarded materials. Children's toys were either missing or mixed in with debris. There was no safe play area, no swing set, no visible signs of childhood joy, just evidence of survival, barely managed. Inside the house, conditions weren't much better. Reports described unsafe living spaces, cluttered rooms, a lack of routine structure, and a general sense of disrepair. The kind of environment where nothing felt stable, not even the people. On the night the community gathered for a vigil, candles flickering in the darkness as voices rose in prayer for 2 missing children, one person was notably absent. The children's mother. Not out searching, not at the microphone appealing for their safe return, not even standing quietly in the background. The absence echoed louder than any siren. Slowly, pieces of a darker picture began emerging. There were rumors, some confirmed, others whispered, of postpartum depression, of emotional breakdowns that preceded the disappearance, of tension in the household that had been building long before May 2nd. Then came a statement that sent chills through anyone who heard it. Daniel Martel, Malihia's partner, allegedly said, Don't upset her, or she'll take it out on the baby. Don't attack Malaya because her mental health is, it's going to be reflected on her daughter. It was a sentence that didn't just suggest stress. It hinted at coercion, at fear, at the presence of emotional instability that could have dangerous consequences. What had happened in that house? What dynamics were at play in the days, weeks, months before two children simply disappeared? 6 months have passed since Lilly and Jack Sullivan vanished from their Nova Scotia home, and the silence that began with stopped text messages has never been broken. The forest keeps its secrets. The Bloodhounds never found a trail. The questions multiply while the answers remain as elusive as morning mist. In cases like this, forensic behavioral analysts often construct theories based on patterns, language, and the spaces between words where truth sometimes hides. The evidence, or lack thereof, points to several disturbing possibilities. One scenario involves a postpartum-related crisis. Postpartum depression, and in rare cases postpartum psychosis, can lead to disconnection, disorientation, and tragic actions, especially in high-stress, unsupported environments. If such a breakdown occurred in the early morning hours of May 2nd, it might explain the mechanical tone of those text messages, the inconsistent explanations, the strange calm in the face of panic. It might also explain why Daniel Martel appeared to tread so carefully around Malihia's emotional state, speaking protectively of her mental health even as the community demanded answers. Another theory suggests complicity born of fear. If something went wrong that morning, an accident, a moment of rage, a decision made in desperation, it's not unheard of for a partner to step in, not out of malice, but out of terror. To protect, to cover, to keep a family from being completely destroyed, even if it already had been. Some whisper of a pact of silence, a unified front that began to fracture only when outside family members arrived and the weight of maintaining the facade became too much to bear. The digital trail tells its own story. Those text messages, with their linguistic inconsistencies and emotional detachment, paint a picture of someone managing a narrative rather than living a nightmare. The sudden silence when family pressure mounted suggests coordination, planning, legal advice. But perhaps the most heartbreaking theory is the simplest, that two beautiful children, full of life and curiosity, met their fate not through stranger danger or elaborate conspiracy, but through the failure of the very people meant to protect them. The bloodhounds that stopped at the driveway. The coats left behind on a cold morning. The 3-hour gap between sickness and disappearance. The mechanical responses that showed no trace of a mother's anguish. The silence that fell like a curtain when questions grew too close to truth. Every piece of evidence, or absence of evidence, points away from the wilderness and back toward that house on Garlic Road, where broken toys mixed with broken promises and two small voices were silenced forever. Lilly would be 7 now. Jack would be 5. They would be in school, making friends, asking endless questions the way children do. Instead, they exist only in photographs and in the hearts of those who refuse to let their memory fade. Their paternal grandmother continues to search, continues to hope, continues to ask the questions that others have stopped asking. She represents the love that should have protected them, the vigilance that should have kept them safe, the voice that should have been heard before it was too late. The case remains open, but the investigation has gone cold. Without new evidence, without witnesses willing to speak, without someone breaking that wall of silence, Lilly and Jack Sullivan may never receive the justice they deserved in life. But their story serves as a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous place for a child isn't in the dark woods or on a busy street. It's in a home where love has turned to burden, where protection has become threat, where the people who should care most have lost their way. Thank you for following Lilly and Jack's story to the end. If this case moved you, if you believe these children deserve to be remembered, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We have more stories that deserve to be heard, more voices that refuse to be silenced, more questions that demand answers. Share your thoughts, your theories, your feelings in the comments below. Sometimes it's the community that keeps hope alive when all else fails. Sometimes it's a single comment, a shared insight, a moment of collective determination that breaks through the silence and brings truth to light. Until then, We remember Lilly and Jack Sullivan, not as victims, but as the bright, curious, loving children they were. Their voices may have been silenced, but their story continues to speak. And we will keep listening until the day justice finally finds its way home.